Hello, and welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast, the podcast all about flight and learning to fly in, well, the middle of your life. And this is episode number 27, and tonight it is our top tips for things you should know / do / good advice for the first 100 hours of your private pilot certificates. And my name is Chris Moran. I'm the Midlife Pilot on YouTube. And to my, let's flip these guys around. To this other side of the screen is our co-host, Brian Siskin from the Heart of Music Row. Good evening, sir.
What's going on, my friend?
Oh, just living a dream. What about you? What's been happening?
Well, I was supposed to do some spin training today, but the weather was overcast and gusting 19. So I think I had made a joke in our Discord that I would have loved to have combined somehow simulated instrument with with that, but no go. So gonna have to reschedule that for what is now next year. So
wow.
So I'm kind of bummed about that, but I didn't really think about how far away I'd have to go for that, and then getting back in time to do this. So at least I'm not having to worry about rushing back to do this.
I see.
All good. And then otherwise, just been, flying a bit here and there. And, hey, by the way, I don't know if I told you this or if you saw this, it's totally random, but, I found a stream, a YouTube account that's, Music City something aviation, plane spotting kind of, account.
Oh yeah.
And they only had one live stream that they did, from John Toon. And, of course it happened to be on the day of the fly, and it's all of us going out to go to Tullahoma. So that was a pretty neat little find, as if there's not already enough footage from our Nobody Cares Flying from a month or two ago, whatever it was.
Well, that's great.
Now there's even more. But that was kind of a neat little find. It's always random, like when you click the internet and then you're like, oh, that's me. That's
right. I'll have to check that out. I think I saw you posted cool. somewhere in the Discord, didn't you? And I haven't I haven't clicked on it yet to look at it. That's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So Josh is in there and some others. So pretty cool. But anyway, just doing all the flying things, and had a fun gathering with two of our sort of loyal patrons and friends, Autumn and Steve Cross. Had some beers with them the other night. And so that was good. And honestly, that's kind of my impetus to this conversation, because I think a lot of what we were talking about, Steve's about to get his check ride. Autumn won't be far behind. And I can't speak to a lot as a low hour, 230 hour pilot or whatever I am, but I can speak to, how impactful the first 100 hours is and what you kind of learn and should be attenuated to, I think, after you've got your check ride done. And it's a strange, we've talked a lot about, we did an episode demystifying the private pilot check ride. If you haven't listened to that or seen that, go check it out. But I think there's something to be said for just this very particular spot, right? Like right after you get your license, there's a lot of sort of, now what? And we've covered some things like destinations and stuff like that, but I don't think we've ever really just bared down and said, okay, the focal length here is 100 hours. What should people be focused on? And so I dropped a little feeler into the Discord that patrons can access, and got some great feedback from people in there. And we together, we all combined our great collective genius and came up with a list of 10 things. So that's the serve up for that.
Nice, super cool. I have not been flying at all.
How's the weather been there in West Virginia?
It's winter and gross. And so the days have become very limited to when you can
get at 4 o'clock and yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I haven't really got to do any flying lately. I really like the topic though. I did when you sent me the idea for this show, because I do think, it was a good reminder for me even to look through the list that we started talking through. And I thought, man, this is just good stuff, probably even beyond the 100-hour, kind of mark where you're at. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting. But before we jump into it, though, I want to remind everyone that's hearing this audio podcast, that we record these live every other Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. So we've got a bunch of people in the live stream on YouTube chat with us tonight. So we'll be hearing from those folks that are in here. So if you're here and have some tips also on things that are great for, things to think about through the first 100 hours, post those and we'll get to reading that content. And if you are checking us out on the audio podcast and have not yet done so, we would definitely appreciate hitting the subscribe button so that you won't miss the new content. And if you can, leave us a rating on Apple especially, and even a review. And we actually have a couple of...
Only good ones, though.
Only good reviews and ratings, correct. We actually have a couple of ratings. I'm going to read two real quick. A couple of reviews that have been left on Apple Podcasts. Dear Spanish left a note that said, this podcast is not only a terrific source of useful and important information for pilots, it's also a meeting point of a community of pilots committed to getting better and having fun. When you start listening, get involved, submit questions, comment during the live stream, and come meet up with others in the group. So thank you. That hits the nail on the head. It's kind of a collective, it's a community that we're building here.
Love it. Thank you for that.
Yes, appreciate that very much. And BSen339 left a comment that said, over 40 and starting to fly, this is your podcast. I subscribe to a lot of aviation podcasts, but this one is different in the best possible way. I got my private license at age 49, and the challenges are different for midlifers. Chris and Brian do an excellent job talking about starting up in aviation a little later in life. I connected with what they were saying from the very first episode. So thank you also for that one.
Nice.
Very cool to hear. Yeah. So there.
We've done our housekeeping.
Let me follow the new episode checklist. That was housekeeping, Chris. Check. Oh, we forgot the important one. Section 3, number 3.
Oh, yeah.
We are, this entire show is, and really everything that we create is, Patreon supported, and both Brian and I have, Patreon, channels. The information for those is in the description of the YouTube video. It's also, I believe, in the description of our podcast episodes. So if you're so inclined and would like to join us up in those communities here, a lot of things are going on. Brian's got a really active Discord server. There's some private channels in there for Patreon members. There's just a lot that's kind of building in these communities. And so anyway, your time there and anything you can contribute is super helpful to helping to make this stuff. This is not a revenue generator for us, but there are costs and things involved in doing it. So yeah, it would be great.
Why not add a podcast to our recreational gas burning? Let's just go full on and all of our endeavors. And by the way, thanks, Alyssa Miller. So glad you got caught up on all of the episodes, and she's saying that she's now qualified to join the live audience. Just for those who are listening to the audio only podcast, there really are no qualifications, but we do appreciate that people think there might be.
Right. Yeah. So that's super kind. All right. Well, let's jump into it then.
Yeah, let's do this. And so, these are not in rank order. These are, we are not flight instructors. Like how many disclaimers can we put out there? Like we're barely capable human beings, much less, but I'll go ahead and take the first one because it's really easy.
Sure.
And we'll just kick them back and forth.
Sure.
And then, really would love for people in the chat to, if there's any additional context to any of these or, any other ideas that people have, please kick them out and we'll try to pull them into the chat after we get through our 10, and then we'll be able to offer maybe even 20.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the first one. So, first 100 hours, there's a lot of things to consider. And, we've talked about, should you get your instrument rating right out of private and all this kind of stuff. We're not getting into that today. We're just kind of thinking about it more from what our experience has been. Looking back to that maybe in the last year, what have we experienced and what are we glad we knew to do, or what did we, wish we knew a little bit more to do? So the first one, this is a very, very simple one, but I think a lot of people forget it. Update your renter's policy. And, you know, I mean, my renter's policy is not especially expensive per se, but I mean, it definitely helps to go from student pilot status to private pilot status. So irrespective of really even your hours, I think it actually helps. So, you know, I can't speak for what your insurance company does or whether you have insurance. You should probably have it. Yeah, so just, you know, one of the first things you should do if you haven't done it already is update your insurance. Your renter's insurance policy.
Yes.
If you're a renter, if you're a owner, please don't.
Well, you should update your own. You should. I mean, if you're an owner as a student pilot, you definitely also. Although a lot of insurance companies, as owners especially, won't let you. That discount won't apply till the next policy year, typically. So it does on renters. I think you can do your renter's policy at any time, but I think owners are most insurance companies don't let you take that advantage of that discount until your next policy renewal. But, and I'll say one quick thing about renter's insurance, something that we were just talking about in our flying club recently. Here's something you may not have thought about before. So like if you're renting from a flight school or like in your case, Brian, like, well, I don't know, all the different contexts of where you can rent planes from. A lot of times what will happen is they have an insurance policy and then the renter will have a renter's policy, and your renter's policy will cover the deductible. Like if you were to do some serious damage to the airplane, your policy would cover the deductible, and then the school's policy or whatever would take over. And people think, well, I'll just carry like $5,000 of, you know, hull coverage to make the deductible. And, you know, just assume you're going to be fully covered with the school's policy. It's not always a safe assumption. There are other contexts that come in, like if they didn't have high enough like liability limits, for instance, and there was an injury to someone else or somebody else's property, it could still come back, you know, to you, and then your secondary coverage again would pick up beyond that. So it's always a good idea. Renter's insurance is pretty cheap, you know, dollar for what you get out of it. So like, I think if you can afford a couple $100 a year and pick up a, you know, $500,000 liability and then an actual reasonably close to the hull damage, the whole cost of the plane you're flying. That's kind of I'm not an insurance agent or an attorney or a flight instructor, but that's kind of
on television.
That's kind of my input on renter's insurance.
Awesome. All right. Perfect.
Good job. So number two on the list, and this is kind of an interesting one, I think, because you talk a lot about this during training and it's a big part of your thing. And then with ForeFlight and EFBs today, it's pretty easy to just stop worrying about this. And in a lot of cases, it's just you flying. You don't always think about it every time in the same plane because you just kind of know where you're at. Weight and balance is a thing to think about, especially as you just get your private and start thinking about hauling your friends around and throwing a bunch of people in the airplane. And it's not just like the raw, I guess we could throw performance considerations in here too, in addition to weight and balance. Like you may say, well, this is within the profile. We're 4.5 pounds under max takeoff weight and it's 97 degrees and, you know, beautiful afternoon. And let's, you know, there's a lot of factors. Always do your weight and balance. Always do your performance calculations, takeoff and landing distance, especially the first few times you're starting to add weight to the airplane that you may not have flown with before. Yeah.
Not to mention that you're probably going to be, well, not probably, you're very likely to be training or flying all of a sudden in a different plane. You're going to join a club or you're going to be renting from another place. And so you're going to not have that native familiarity with the useful load of that particular aircraft that maybe you've been training in. And you're just, you know, you're not going to be, it may not immediately come to mind because you've never had to think about how much fuel am I hauling. You're just topping off all the time during training and it's just you and your instructor, and the plane generally does fine with that. And so you just never really had to think about, do I need to have half tanks here to get this, you know, this done? But all that being said, let's also back off from probably, I mean, 100 hours is a pretty broad spectrum of time. I would say in the earlier part of that, perhaps don't fly around with a full plane of people if you, anyway. I mean, you can, but it's like, that's just a lot. Like build up to that like you have everything else.
Sure. Comments in the chat currently going on. FlySport says weight and balance unless you have Ben's Beast. Of course, talking about the Sage's 300 horsepower 182. So it takes a lot to get that plane out of balance, I'm sure. Or my 235, One Dog Geek said, and it is kind of that. It is easy to get complacent in the same plane. Like we just know we could throw 4 adult humans my size plus a couple 100 pounds in the luggage and still be good in the 235. So, but yes, you're right. Especially as you're moving around.
It might still be a 172, but man, those can really vary. I mean, the one I trained in had this insane useful load of, 1,000, which is bonkers for a 172. That's not going to be the case for most 172s.
That's right.
And I like what Alyssa said here about getting enrolled in the Wings program and having that that's sort of like, it's like the AAA discount of aviation. So that's a good idea to leverage those Wings credits for whatever you can.
Yeah, and that's not in our list, but Wings, that's a great program if you're not familiar with it. The FAA Wings, there is so much content. I mean, so much content. In addition, you can, to the insurance benefit of a little discount, you also can, it counts towards your biennial flight review. Your flight review, as it's called now. I'm not sure exactly the formula for how that works, but you get credit towards that, and you may actually be able to I think you might be able to eliminate it, or at least the ground portion. I'm not sure how the formula works, but there's tons of benefits to the Wings credit or Wings program. So you should check that out too. Totally.
All right. Number 3, what we have here is, and I think that, and by the way, the last one about weight and balance, that was Josh's suggestion. So shout out to Josh for that. And I think this one kind of came from One Dull Geek, more or less, if I'm not mistaken. Usually anything wise comes from him, right? So consider flying solo to a destination first before taking passengers. And so that seems like, maybe a little overcautious, maybe to some people, or maybe a little excessive, but I can say for sure that the new sort of form of saturation that you have as a newer pilot is that threshold is still pretty weak. When you first get out of the gate, after 100 hours, you're going to be doing a lot, post check ride, you'll be doing a lot better. But going to unfamiliar places, you just don't want to have passengers that might be presenting any kind of attention challenges or anything else on top of managing an unfamiliar place. It doesn't mean that like every place you go, you need to make sure you go there by yourself first. But, I think that for maybe some of the more, ambitious trips or complicated airspace, or just to get familiar visually, it doesn't have to be the most, complicated place either. It's just not a bad strategy, right? You're going to be doing some flying by yourself anyway. Make that an option for you to do, a little recon before you take passengers to a place. I love that idea.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's good. Like you said, it won't apply necessarily to you won't be able to do it every time. But if you can make it work, I think it's good. Anymore, I count on my passengers. Seems like everybody I fly with is better at seeing other airplanes and finding the airport than me. It's like, those are my two, people be like, it's right there. Is the field? It's right there. And I'm going, is that the airport?
Yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
All right.
Still happens. Those moments where you're like, oh wait, it's right there.
It's under me. Yeah. I've definitely been there. Oh, there it is. All right. Number 4, treat every flight like the DPE is still sitting in the right seat. Yeah. I mean, that definitely take some intentionality, I think, to do, but it's
Chris, you're not buying this one. These are our 10 tips, and then you're not selling this.
No, I'm in. I think you, even if it's just in, I say I'm in, even if it's just as in a, conceptually, I don't know that it means a lot of things have happened. The way I use checklists has changed. As a student, I was the read the thing and do them. And now it's do all the things and then take a look at the checklist to make sure I didn't miss anything. Right. It's like those kind of things, which either still would have been I could have done either with the DPE and that's still accurate. So I guess the point is well taken. Do things the right way all the time. Don't cut corners.
Yeah. And I think there's some sort of tertiary benefits to that modality too, which is to say, like, when you're with a DPE, you are, and hopefully you've been doing this all along before your check ride, but on your check ride, you're verbalizing what you're doing.
Right. And
by virtue of the fact that you're speaking out loud, if you just pretend like your passenger is a DPE, you know, I mean, you're not going to sit there and say like, well, you know, you're not going to hit them with like shop talk, but there's just something about, I find, you know, flying with passengers that I find myself pretty verbose about, you know, for people that are unfamiliar, especially, right? Like I either want somebody to, if they are a pilot, I want them to know that I'm already thinking about this thing. So like, you know, I'll say, you know, okay, I'm getting a little low. All right, I'm going to fix that, you know, whatever, you know, so I do that even with people that are not pilots. And so I think that maybe that's like a weird kind of corollary to, you know, maybe it doesn't have to be thought about so strictly as like the DPE in the right seat, but just sort of like some sort of other voice or, you know, voice of reason perhaps in the right seat that you just want to assure that you're doing the right things and that you're aware of what's going on.
There's some good commentary going on in the chat that I just want to mention real quick. We were talking about taking passengers with you. You know, you said don't load the plane up, and that don't load the plane up with people right afterwards. And you spawned quite a discussion in the chat. Alyssa started by saying, I got chastised in direct messages on Facebook by someone who felt I was being irresponsible by taking my sister as a passenger a week after my check ride. And Stinky Weasel, who I know is a friend of mine in the flying club where I'm at, said, I literally had my wife and son jump in the plane for a flight around the home airport within 1 hour of coming home from my check ride. Alyssa, you're fine. I did the same. I mean, I had people, you know, pretty much the same day. I took my buddy Kevin to Elkins like the day after my second time ever to Elkins. And I think the point was more like, don't push the limits of the airplane. Don't load, you know, 4 people in the airplane's a lot different than like your wife and son. Like that's a different kind of vibe. So yeah, everyone is fine. You're a licensed pilot. There's nothing irresponsible about taking a passenger, for a flight in your airplane.
Just don't take any other people, that aren't your family, right? Like somebody else's family, like you don't know them. Don't take strangers and put them in the plane. Right?
I mean, yeah, I guess.
Okay.
Would you take a stranger in the plane?
That's actually a good question. I've seen somebody on the YouTubes do that before. It was just totally kind of a random thing. And I just thought, man, I don't know. Like, I feel like I need to have a little context around the person.
Absolutely.
If that's going to be the case. So maybe we'll add that as number 11, like, you know, try not to fly randos.
Yeah, exactly.
So the next one, and so this one I think we all are in agreement with and have a lot of different ways that we've kind of done this for ourselves. So number 5 is to maintain a training mindset. You know, just because you've got your check ride done doesn't mean that now it's just time to play. It is time to play, but it's also time to, the training is on you now. And so, you know, practicing maneuvers, holding yourself to particular standards, you know, doing pattern work. It's not just for, your training. So I think you kind of have to come up with a way, something, some people do it programmatically. I know that One Dull Geek has got it hard scheduled, to do essentially a self flight review, doing all the maneuvers and needing to do those to the ACS. I think that's at bare minimum a really good thing to do. There's a lot of different ways that people can do it, but I think that more than anything, it's a mentality. That's also the gateway to kind of improving your minimums and things like that. Is when you see the right opportunity to go, this is a great day to go train in. The crosswind is a direct crosswind today, and it's only 1 to 2 knots more than my minimums, and it's a very wide runway, and I feel good, and it's pretty consistent. It's not super gusty and weird. And like, this is a perfect day. Like, you have to have that training mindset of, going out and seeking out this kind of opportunities to keep proficient and improve also.
Absolutely. And I can tell you, my experience was it was difficult for a while because I got in the phase where we were going places a lot now. Like that's kind of the only time I was flying was to like go to here or go to this other place. And you end up with like one landing, each long, you build 2 or 3 hours at a time and one landing, and that's all you've done all this time. And before you know it, it's like, it's been months since I've done anything but like one takeoff and landing, normal takeoff and landing at a thing. And, so it is good to get out and just, for me, it's not a regimented, like I don't have a schedule or like a thing that I'm going to do, but like when the time presents itself and I think, man, I'm going to go up today and just, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go out and do some maneuvers. I'm going to go work on this or work on this other thing. Or, I saw this cool thing on YouTube I want to try, like I've never thought about, configuring at this point or doing this way, or just, it's to learn the airplane and to feel things. And, that kind of stuff is pretty invaluable, and it doesn't have to be regimented and like scripted. It's just kind of, kind of organically feeling it out and working through it. But more than just flying from point A to point B with one landing at each end, I think is kind of the point. Absolutely.
I definitely felt that, I realized pretty quickly on pattern work is going to be critical, and to try to do it, at other places and all that. So, training mindset. That's all. So now we're on to number 6, which kind of factors into this.
Yeah, it does. Visit a lot of local airports and get to know the FBOs and services and whatnot. I think that's good too. For lots of reasons. You make friends, you find out that gas is easy to get to and at $1 cheaper than your home airport. They have a cool restaurant that you might want to take your buddy to, for $100 hamburger. You feel more comfortable landing there if you ever need to, because you're, it's a diversion place. I mean, there's a lot of good benefits, I think, to going to other airports in your area.
Yeah. And just getting familiar with the unfamiliar, especially if it's proximate, those are going to be your alternates probably, one day for something. And it's just nice to have already, to have the confidence that you've already been in there when you weren't, just needing to get there. And, you'll figure out that, here's how you access every gate code. Here's the universal gate code key and the universal, so you just, one of the things that at least I didn't get in my training at all really was any of that tribal sort of assimilation or knowledge relative to FBOs. And, it just seems weird, as a sort of, tangential add-on. Josh in the Patreon or in the Discord, he said, don't be I guess I forget the word he uses, but sort of like don't be sheepish, right? Like ask for what you want. And he was talking about a lot of things, ATC, a lot of different things. But one of the things he was talking about that I definitely can relate to is just going to an FBO and just when you're new and you're not familiar with it, you kind of sheepishly are in there sort of like, is this okay? Kind of, like, no, you can go in there. Like they're there for you and you can, I'm not saying be a jerk, but and demand things, but you can walk in there with a particular confidence to say, yes, I need a crew car because I've got to get to this place and I need this to happen. Can you help me? As opposed to just, sort of soft pedaling everything. I was fortunate in that I did get to experience some of that with Tyler, with my instructor. As an aside to that, I think there are kids, especially these days, who are coming up in the like structured flight school, 141 programs. Yeah. Who are, you talk about not getting any of this outside knowledge. Like I met, this is no joke, a CFII from with a student. They had to, well, I won't go into all the details, but basically was pumping fuel for his very first time as a CFII. Yeah. So, I mean, those kind of things, I mean, it just kind of, it floored me because I thought I did that on lesson 1. Like I knew how to ground the thing and, with all the, like that was from the very beginning. I thought, how do you get that far and have never even like put gasoline, put low lead in your plane? It's like, it kind of shocked me, but I think there is some of that depending on the training environment that you're in. If you're at a school where like all that's handled for you and like, that's just not what you're not getting that, but
Those are some of the scariest things, aren't they? Right when you start going out on your own, like what's the decorum at the at the FBO? Do I tip these guys or not? Like, like what's that stuff for me? And feeling my way through that early on was just really a challenge.
Yeah, and maybe you've fueled your plane, but you've just never been at a bigger place where there's a line, and how do you manage that? Or when you're coming into a place and you're going to be doing transient sort of parking or, overnight parking for the first time. And you kind of roll in and there's nobody there to welcome you. And you don't really know, somebody might run out and all of a sudden start, there's just all this right. kind of in between type of stuff that you can't really get until you just get out there and suffer the indignities of, like even marshalling, right? I never okay, that stuff's in the book. Okay. But I mean, come on. Right. And you get out there in the real world and you're getting sometimes some pretty complex instructions right. or weird kind of, I've had some things where, the guy was maybe getting frustrated with me and I just opened up the door and was like, hey man, I'm really sorry. I thought you were telling me to do something totally right. different and I'm not very smart. So
that was challenging for me too. I think the three most important marshalling when I learned that they're going to be facing how my nose needs to go to them. Like that was an epiphany moment for me when I pulled into this one place and the guy walked to a spot and turned his back on me. And I was like, yeah, I'm coming up behind this guy. And I thought, I know what he wants me to do. He wants me to go around and face him. Like that was like a moment.
So he doesn't want me to mow over him.
He just right. I should have just came up behind him and stopped and parked and shut the engine down. He's like, what are you doing? No, that was a key one though. Like which direction he faces. He's going to be facing, where he wants you to pull in. And, but some of the bigger airports, like even John Toon, when we came to see you, it was so crazy busy. They had follow me cars, like they would come out and meet you in a golf cart and you just kind of follow the cart
sometimes.
Where it's going to go, which was helpful.
Yeah. So it's sometimes. I don't think I've ever, as many times as I used to fly a plane from somewhere else and leave it here for 4 or 5 days and fly it a lot and then, be in sort of overnight parking there. I don't think I ever got a follow me car once. I think it was just
right? The
guys would just kind of see you and just kind of mosey out. But that's what I'm saying is as much as you start to think you understand any kind of routine, it's not one. It's always going to be different. You just got to get comfortable with, being flexible and figuring it out. So, cool. And then, number 7 kind of actually rolls back into number 5 where it's sort of an expansion of that. But is it your turn or mine?
Yours. You're odd.
Is it my turn?
You're odd. So.
I'm odd. Oh yeah. Again, about the training mindset and even going further to have a plan, or at least a methodology, a known way of going about expanding your minimums. And that is a very, it's kind of like that first time your parents leave you at home by yourself and they're going to go out for the night. You're just sort of like, you've been wanting this the whole time. And then you get to that point and then you're like, wait, I don't have any supervision. And so I think that maybe one sort of thing we can kind of add on to this is to sort of maintain a relationship with your CFI and or another CFI, and don't be afraid to ask them if you think it's a good day to work on your crosswind landings and improve that, or if you want to, maybe deal with slightly lower ceilings or, whatever it might be. Feel free to, talk to people. I've done things like, before I started taking really, really, really long trips, I would do my entire flight plan and route it out and everything. And then, just hire a CFI to do a Zoom call with me and just look it over, so, whether it's expending your minimums or anything else, just, make sure that that you've got some way that you're mindfully doing that. You don't want to just get caught in a situation and then survive it and then say, well, I guess that means I can do that now.
I think, I definitely think it's important to have a plan to do it. I'll tell an anecdotal story about some of the things that happened for me were like, we had, if you remember a couple summers ago, I don't know if it impacted you, Brian, this far south as you are, but there were a lot of fires. Actually, it probably did. These were like Canadian fires, which is what's crazy.
I was training during that.
Oh, okay.
I did like one of my first solos in that.
But it blew my mind because it was like Canadian fires, but the smoke even here was a problem. It impacted, visibility everywhere. And that summer there was like, there were many like afternoons and evenings where there was like the weather was perfect, but the visibility was like 4 miles. I took opportunities in that to go out and say like, well, what does 4 miles visibility look like? Like when you get to really see that, I mean, unless you're, it's hard to find weather that you're comfortable as a VFR pilot flying in at 4 miles, but this was like, the sky was clear forever. The weather was perfect, but it was like the visibility was reduced. And we're like, this is the perfect chance. So I would go out and just it was amazing how close you had to get to Clarksburg before you could see the air. I mean, like, this is crazy. I'm inside. I mean, I'm like almost there and can't see the field. And, but it was just really good to get. So that was kind of and I thought to myself, would I voluntarily do this? But no, but also, I mean, it's doable. Like you could make that work if you had to. And then things like crosswind components was a big deal for me because I was convinced, I was terrified of crosswind stuff. But then the more you fly and you're on a trip and like, even though the forecast said this one thing, you get to your destination, you're approaching your destination. It's like, ooh, I don't know. That's a few knots above what I've done before. And then you land and you think, okay, I mean, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And then you'd go out and do them a few more times. You're like, okay, well now instead of like, 5-knot crosswind component, I'm calling it like 8 is my new number. And, you just start kind of, you don't want to, this isn't to say throw caution to the wind and just go crazy, but you will invariably end up in a situation where the wind was supposed to be, 6 knots and it's 9 now. Yeah. And it is what it is. And, you've got to kind of figure it out. And
I got into a situation like that when I flew out to Texas this year where, just that weird realization where it's like, I've been flying for 2 days straight. This is where I'm going. This is my destination. I'm not familiar with this area otherwise. This is where I need to be. This is a huge runway. This is a 150-foot wide runway, but the crosswinds are gusting 15 plus, like it was really wacky. And my landings, I say 2 because I did one go around, and then came around and my second approach was sort of like as bad as the one that I went around on, but I kind of just realized this is just getting worse and I'm not going to have a great landing here right now, and just get the plane down and be safe about it and don't hurt the plane if you can. And so I got it down, but it was definitely one of those just, I did not enjoy that at all. I'm very glad to be on the ground, but that does not mean that all of a sudden my minimums are now 15-knot crosswind.
That's right. That's right. I just have always found it's like, you don't know, the old saying, you don't know what you don't know. Like until you've experienced, it's very hard to, without methodically working and slowly taking your time and working up to higher minimums, like you just don't know what it is until the only way you're going to do it is to do it. It's not like you can just say like, well, at 212 hours, I'll be 8-knot crosswind, no, that's not how it works. You've got to just do it. And
so that sets up number 8 really well, which is yours because you're even.
It does. Fly long cross countries and go places. And for sure. That's what we got it for, really, right? Was to go do things and see new things. And along the lines, the theme of learning, like it's also easy to get bored on these things, but also, do you know how much you learn? Like stuff you're not even planning on trying to learn on these long cross country flights. Like I get more time messing with stuff in my plane, the avionics and the engine monitor and like all of the bells and whistles when you're in a long, like 2.5 hour cruise portion. It's like, what better time to like mess with all of your stuff, and really figure out how I've learned more. I swear I've learned more about my JPI engine monitor on long cross countries than I have at any other point in the process. So I think cross countries are great.
Yeah, that and also just what's going to set you up for instrument really well, from what I understand, right, is to be on flight following and talking to ATC a lot. And, when you're starting out, even at the check ride point, my experience for all of that was pretty minimal, right? And so then you get out and then you really start to get a sense of what because the whole thing about the communications piece is about having an expectation of what they're going to ask you. And so you can kind of sense things coming, when you're early on with it, just after check ride, you're not really necessarily always familiar with the kind of the rat-a-tat of ATC. There's little nuanced things, like you can kind of hear when somebody starts to kind of clear their desk, right? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden they're just doing housekeeping and cleaning house. And so, rapid fire, like I'm going to be on his table here. And so be listening, just weird little subtleties about,
that's right.
Not missing calls and knowing what, you can kind of anticipate. And then just little goofy things, like you start to hear, wow, they're sending everybody to this frequency, Memphis Center or whatever. I'm just going to go ahead and put that in. Uh-huh. And that's probably working. They're going to tell me to, just little ways to get ahead, just a lot. Right. So all that little minutia does amount to a comfort and an experience that you can only get from just being up there for a while and going someplace. And then you get like the new places, the new FBOs, the testing your minimums, and, you get all of that.
I love that stuff too. I love the pacing of dialogue with ATC. And I love when all that stuff just works out. And when you've planned this thing that's coming and you're right, because it is what's going to happen, and they get hand off and you act like you know what you're doing. And then here's all the little things, these are stupid, but I love when you stay with the same controller and they switch you to another frequency. I started doing this 18 months ago, probably, or 2 years. I used to be they'd say Scott 52 Lima, change to my frequency, 123.1. And I'd say, okay, change into 123.1. Change 123.1. And I'd be like, 352 Lima was on 123.1. Now, I just love, this was my favorite little trick from 2 years ago. I'll switch to their frequency. It's the same controller, and then call them and say, okay, 52 Lima, I'm with you now on 123.1. So only call them once, but it accomplishes the same mission. I need to call them once, change frequencies, and talk to them again immediately. Just change frequencies and talk to them. You're just getting into a better reception. Anyway, those little things like that, those little efficiency things that have kind of, I love that stuff. I really do.
It's nice when you get a little bit more experience and you feel like I'm on a roll here. I don't feel weird about any radio calls or things that happened, or, and yes, there were some curveballs and some weird stuff, but it was fine. It's a real confidence builder just to get out there.
When I'm by myself, I've grown. I never thought it would happen to me. Never that I would be a music listener.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh. What a change that has made. I mean, I didn't think I could love being in the air and flying in an airplane anymore until I started bringing music into the environment. And now I'm just could this get any better?
You listen to Air Supply?
No, I'm listening to
Yacht Rock.
No, I can't.
Cross.
I could not think of the name. I was trying to come up with the albums that I've got.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I couldn't come up with any of the
You're definitely not listening to my stuff, but so I have not. This is the only recently.
I am though.
Right now, in the plane.
It's on my. I've already digitized. It's on my phone. Yeah.
You got a turntable in your plane? That's pretty.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
No, I just got a Bluetooth headset fairly recently, so I'm on the verge of tuning out, because it'll. I like the idea too that I can read, the app will record everything that's happening, and it's got little time blocks on the interface on the tablet. And so if you feel like you missed something, you can just go back and I just feel like I have enough tools to not feel like I'm just tuning out.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. I don't ever want to get into that space either, but I think it's reasonable to have some form of, I mean, I'd be having conversations, you know, I mean, it's like, it's no different than if I had a passenger in cruise and we're talking through this whole thing. Like, it's easy to, you know, it's like driving. People are always like, don't talk on the phone and drive. And I'm like, well, if I had somebody in the car, I'd be talking to them and gesturing and like doing all the, you know, I don't know. Anyway, where are we? Number 9.
Number 9. I'm odd.
You are. I forgot.
So, you know, reminder, seems kind of dumb, but to take passengers in your airplane, take that very seriously, that's what you're doing, and be aware of the effects that's going to have on your decision making. It's impossible through your private training to really have any sense of what that's about and what that really feels like, and what are the nuanced pressures that you can find yourself put under. Little things, you know, it could just be like it's cold outside and you're pre-flighting and they just want to get going, or, you know, it could just be just about anything, attention diversion, or, you know, whatever. But I find myself really going out of my way when I have passengers of any kind, and, you know, making sure that they're totally confident in what's going on and not rushing through and, you know, explaining things in layman's terms without, you know, because, you know, you don't want to just start over explaining to them, because then it just starts to short circuit them, and then they become nervous in a different way. It's like, this guy won't shut up. So, you know, I think that just the decision making stuff that has to do with passengers, we talked about the weight and balance thing, but I think it's more than that. I think it's about really just recognizing that you haven't been trained in that, and it's something that you only get better at through doing. And I think that, you know, when people first get their check ride done, that's one of the first things you want to do. And everybody here's talking about, I mean, Alyssa's getting called out on the internet or whatever, but that's silly. But ultimately the, you know, you're going to take people up. And so you just want to have a really rock solid passenger brief. You want to have a plan, you know, and there's so many little things that you just don't think about, you know, and there's some horrible, you know, people walking into propellers, or, I mean, there's just so many things, man, that you really got to be aware of and be thinking about, and you do not get trained on. So I just wanted to make sure we got on the list that I think your first 100 hours is really hugely about understanding how to accommodate safely passengers.
I think it's great. There are a million details where, how to keep your feet and legs out of the way of the controls. You know, I mean, I don't know. There's just a lot, and it changes by plane. It changes by passenger. I guess I was thinking about, when you sent that list, I've been thinking about my passengers, and most of mine have been people who have some aviation or are at least pretty interested in aviation. And so it's been a little different experience, because like the people I'm taking are like, tell me all the things about everything all the time. Like, you
begrudgingly tell them.
Right. Exactly. I'm like, well, I'll talk the whole flight. Like, this is great. I haven't really had a ton of experience I guess my dad, you know, went with me, and I've had a couple of passengers that weren't super interested, but I think that makes a difference too. That's a whole different experience, right? Than like taking super.
Well, and just there's little pro tips, you know, it's like, what I learned is, especially for people that are, even if you have any kind of spidey sense that they're going to be slightly nervous, which most people are if they're not familiar, you know, do all of the pre-flight and everything, fuel everything before they get there.
Yeah.
And then when they don't have 30 minutes to sit around and look at the plane and
be like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm just making sure these bolts are still in here. You know, like making sure the elevator's not going to fall off. Like the rudder's still connected.
Yeah, this thing kind of moves. You don't want it to move too much, but you want it to move a little bit. It's complicated.
What are you doing there? Oh, I'm just making sure we got all that water out of the fuel. Yeah.
So that, you know, yeah, there's just a bunch of little stuff like that. And then, and so now we're coming up on 50 minutes in. So we got about 10 minutes left. And we've got one more to go, and then we'll ask everybody in the chat to throw in, what did we miss? Give us your short list and all that. But Chris, take us home with number 10.
Number 10 is on Casey's top 40 is Overprepare. get weather briefings, have an alternate, you know, I guess that, I mean, yeah, I think that is probably the largest challenge. The further into this you get, is like, it's the easiest thing to start not doing, is to, you know, I won't do this one thing this time. I won't check this one thing this time. Like, it's going to be fine. That's hard.
Yeah. You don't want to do the sort of, what do they say? Safety erodes, and it's like sort of a death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of a scenario. But I mean, yeah, ultimately, it seems weird when you're not, you know, it may seem weird to some people. Maybe it isn't to others. I don't know. But, you know, get a real human being on a weather briefing and go over it. Not just when you're concerned, but just to even confirm what you're already seeing, you know, holistically. And I think that the overprepare part of that is really about when things get shaky, not if, but when things get shaky, when you get saturated, something unexpected happens, you know, whatever, especially with passengers in the plane, all of that. The one thing that's going to really get you through is, you know, a little bit of underlying confidence that I have prepared for that. Like, you can mitigate a lot of surprises and issues, you know. So yeah, always have an out, get weather briefings, over prepare. You don't get any cool points for just like, I'm not going to bother, you know. So, right. You know, and then the one thing we didn't really put in here that we'll just kind of cap it off with ultimately is, you should have already read The Killing Zone one time, before you got your license. And then, so now you're in your first 100 hours, read it again, because you're about to be at the top of Mount Stupid, in terms of hours, and read it again.
Yep. I think so. Ben Singer, the Sage, says, my suggestion, make a concerted effort to keep your good habits that you learned as a student. Pre-flight like you're a student, maintain checklist, discipline, etc., etc.
Hear that, Chris?
Oh, I do hear it, and it's important for sure.
Me too. I need to do, like, nobody's perfect, right? No. You're just going to have moments where you just kind of fritz out or forget things, or you get thrown out of your routine.
Timestamp Tedder brings up a good point about checklist discipline. It's easy when you fly lots of different tail numbers. Like Ted got his sport pilot license and has probably flown more airplanes. I mean, I don't even know what number he's up to now, but it's like every time I see him, it's in a different, not just like a different of the same make and model. I mean, like different airplanes, like entirely.
Yeah. Ted, you're a wild man. Keep it up. It's inspirational. And go check out Ted's channel too. He's got, it's like all these, even ATC is calling up Ted and being like, what is that plane you're flying?
That's awesome.
Well, yeah.
I'm scrolling back. I'm scrolling back to look for some content. See what we've missed in the chat. There's been a lot. You
guys are talking to each other, which is great, but we also are trying to leverage you to fill the last 5 minutes of our podcast.
Carl Pennington said earlier, listening to us, he's realizing his days in the Marines, the helicopter crew chief, put him a long way ahead of the power curve, like marshaling and fueling and dealing with FBOs and stuff. So he had a lot of that experience, I guess, in the Marines. So
that's good.
To get that kind of insight before you even, went down the road, that would be tremendously helpful.
Chris, how do you think you would do in the military?
Oh, no, I wouldn't make it through basic training.
Yeah.
I watched, that's another story for another. I saw a YouTube video about like the medical stuff when you come in, and my daughter, actually Cecilia, made me watch a thing about the peanut butter shot, like the big shot of penicillin in the butt, like, and it's like this huge. Anyway, yeah, I saw that and I thought I wouldn't even get through. I wouldn't make it through.
Even just the prereqs.
Nah, I'd be out. There's no way.
Oh man.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I think that's a good list, really.
Yeah.
I think that pretty much encompasses, it's funny how even the further you get into things, how much of the stuff you kind of reflect on come back around the core tendencies of the training that you had. They've had, decades to kind of work out the training models that work and what's important and what's not. And I think they've got it refined. It's pretty well refined. Like, don't be an idiot. plan, make smart choices, repeat the same, like repeatable actions is what keeps us alive. So
be a creature of habit and in the good ways.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, we'll see how it goes, but everybody says, that it's never going to get boring, right? You're never going to get complacent, and there's always, you learn something on every flight. You really do. But I do think there's probably something pretty special about that first 100 hours post check ride, where just the gravity of what you're doing, you get to sort of feel that, and the highs and the lows are still there in a good way. And it's great to just reap the reward of all of the hard work, just to get, a lot of people I think get, so head down about training, and that's just how it's structured. And you get out there and you're like, oh, right, I did this so I can go places. And, so it's just such an incredible, that time period. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like moving out of your parents' house and like, I don't know, getting your first apartment or going to college or whatever you're doing. And it's like, man, I can go to sleep whenever I want, wake up whenever I want. And then you realize pretty quickly, like, I can't live like this. I need more help. I need structure to my life. And then, keep the training mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's good stuff.
Yeah.
Big thank you to, we had a great crowd tonight in the chat. It was always good to, I do enjoy, I try to pay attention all the time, but I also do enjoy all of the chat that's happening in the background. This is part of the community thing. So if you're just checking us out on the audio podcast, that's cool. But if you're ever free on every other Wednesday night. So, let's do housekeeping real quick for that too. For those, following along, this is episode 27. We would normally be scheduled on the 21st, which is too close to Christmas for me. So this is going to be our last one until after the new year. So January 4th will be our next evening to record. So if you can make it, hang out with us on YouTube at the Midlife Pilot channel, and do check the comments of the YouTube video down in the description or of this podcast if you're looking to join these great communities we have going with the Discords or either of our Patreons. There's all kind of stuff happening. We're all in there all the time, Brian and I and others, and there's just a whole community that's kind of building here. And
not to make it confusing, because we've got a question here. Hi, what's the Discord? It's a chat server. It's a little confusing in the sense that, Chris, you have your own Patreon for your own YouTube efforts, and then I have my own Patreon for my own sort of efforts, and our efforts are sort of different but common. And then common here. And then the Discord server is something that I cranked up on my Patreon.
And then I just jumped in and like, I'm coming there.
Right. But it's all good. It's like eventually we'll have to figure out some sort of like, we'll have to tear down the wall or, like whatever. We'll have to figure out some way of neatly sort of making that mutually visible for either a set of patrons or just redoing it. Or I don't know if anybody has any ideas on how to like organize things. That'd be awesome. But the cool thing is it's a challenge that is only because things have just been growing, and the audio podcast is doing great. So thanks for everybody for listening to that. And yeah, the chat here, I mean, you guys don't really talk to us very much. You're talking amongst yourselves. That's fine. We'll take that.
Heck yeah.
I like it's kind of like Chris, like we're kind of like the guys at the side, like there's a party and then we're just sort of in the corner just sort of nerding out about something while everybody else is having a much more it's almost like they're having a better conversation than we are in this whole podcast.
That's right.
But yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you. So let's Chris, will you send us out of here? Get us out. Let's do this.
Yep. Thanks for potting. Thanks for joining. We'll see you in 4 weeks from today for the next episode. January 4th will be 2023, and we'll do another year of this. It's been a great year. I hope everybody has a great Christmas and New Year's and any other holiday that you're celebrating this time of year. And we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for potting, Brian.
Thanks, buddy.